Hi, and thank you for joining me. This is a re-recording of a presentation, talk, exhibition that I gave a year ago in Hebrew in commemoration of Holocaust Memorial Day, which starts tonight here in Israel. It's a presentation of calligraphic works that I did having to do with the Shoah in response. And perhaps I'll start with a short, maybe 5-minute introduction to the presentation. Start with a bit of family history. My father was a survivor of the Shoah. He was a survivor of Auschwitz. And he survived together with his two brothers. Not so fortunate were his two parents and his two younger sisters, who were taken on the first transport from Malava in Poland, where my father was raised, to the gas chambers of Treblinka. And there they were murdered. My father didn't talk much about the Shoah at home. If there were questions, theological questions, how did God allow something like the Shoah to happen? We possibly heard some answers in school, traditional answers, such as God, the hidden face of God. We're in a period where God is hiding his face and not taking an active role, or God doesn't interfere with free will. And it was the Nazis who did the murders out of their supposed free will. And even answers that sound a bit crazy, that some sort of collective punishment and for the Jewish people. And once there is such a decree, then God doesn't intervene and pick out, innocent people. And these answers, I don't know if they really satisfied us, or we just repressed our reactions. But as one gets older, matures, the questions become, if one seriously thinks about it, they become more acute, and the answer is much less satisfactory. And the existential feeling that I feel I live in existentially is that I'm living in two different worlds. On the one hand, there's so much good in the world. There's so much beauty in the world. There's so much beauty in nature. There's so much wisdom in nature, infinite wisdom in nature. And there can be so much love in the world, love between people, kindness between people, sacrifice that people do for the people that they love or for humanity itself. And there seems to be order and goodness, and one wants to be part of it, and one wants to contribute to this goodness and make the world a better place. And on the other hand, there's so much suffering in the world. There's suffering due to nature. Earthquakes, floods can wipe out entire populations just like that. And of course, there's so much suffering that humans cause the sufferings. I mean, right now, everyone's involved in the Ukrainian war, the war in Ukraine and Russia, but I'm going to specifically talk about the suffering of my people, the Jewish people, throughout our entire history, starting with the Khurban, going on through inquisitions, expulsions, blood libels, pogroms, and of course the Shoah. So much murder, so much needless murder, some innocent lives killed for no rational reason whatsoever. And the feeling was just one of chaos. And one is led to, theologically heretical thoughts of let din v'let dayan. There is no judge, there is no rule. It's just all a matter of chaos. Now, there's a well-known midrash. For those that know midrash, person is going from place to place, from town to town, and he sees a birah doleket, a tower or a castle that's on fire, and nothing's being done about this. And he says, is it possible that there's no owner to this castle? And the owner, which is obviously a metaphor for God, peeks out and says, I am the owner. And Midrash sort of just ends there. And the question that begs to be asked, that begs to be screamed, and that's never asked is, well, if you're the owner, how could you let something like this, something beautiful like this, go up in flames and not do anything about it? And so, in some sense, my exhibition, or the works that I did afterwards, is my cry, my screaming out the question of how could something like this have been let to happen. And I know there's a certain naivety. There's in the questions. There's a naivety in expecting any answers, which of course there can't be any answers. And yet, I still think that in every generation, this cry must be heard, and the question still must be asked: how could something like this have happened, whether it's towards God or towards man? And so I will now do a share screen and begin my presentation. Okay, so this is where it all began. This is not one of the pieces that I did. This is a photograph that my daughter Miri sent me from Auschwitz. She had taken she had led a group of youth from Australia to Poland to visit the death camps. And at Auschwitz, there was this book of victims. It was listed in alphabetical order. And my daughter turned to P, which is the beginning of our family name, Pludwinski. And there was a listing of all the Pludwinskis that had perished in the Shoah, and just to see this, to see my name, my family name repeated over and over and over again: Pludwinski, place of death unknown, Pludwinski, so-and-so murdered in Lodz, Pludwinski, so-and-so murdered, death unknown, Pludwinski murdered, death unknown, murdered. It was just I was dumbfounded. I was shocked. I mean, my father said even in Poland, Pludwinski, there weren't that many Pludwinskis, and just to see so many Pludwinskis murdered, it was just, it just affected me so deeply and so personally, and I felt that I had to react to this through my works. And so I began to do some calligraphic works related to the Shoah. So here is the first piece that I did. It's called Echa Ayeka. Echa means how, and Ayeka means where are you. What I did is I took a a copy of the photograph. I printed it out on a certain paper. I had ripped it up into shreds of paper, but not before writing on it the words Echa Ayeka in angry, wild brush script. Aleph Yud Kaf Hey. Echa, as I said, means how. It's the first word of the Book of Lamentations. Also, Echa, how could this have happened? And with the red dot in the middle, it's turned into Ayeka, where are you? Which is actually the words that God asks Adam in the Garden of Eden after the sin. And here I'm just turning it around and throwing the question back at God. Ayeka, where were you? After I'd done the first piece, I decided to do a series of works. I just felt I had more and more and more stuff that was repressed that I had to get out. This is called Aye Makom Kvodo, which is translates as where is the place of your glory, which is part of the Jewish prayers. I'd written it again in a sort of abstract Hebrew script, Yem Kom Kvodo, and there's no real reason why I did it twice, except for the felt it needed in the composition. Abstract writing, and of course I placed it over a different page from another photograph that my daughter had sent me, a further list of victims. A word about abstract calligraphy. I mean, the words Ayem Makom Kvodo are quite known in Jewish prayer, and I felt to write it very legibly wouldn't have really had the impact that I wanted. And about abstract calligraphy, just like in songs that we know, there are two components. You know, you have the words to the song, and you have the melody to the song, and sometimes it's the melody, the emotions of what you're hearing in the music that reach deeper, penetrate deeper into the heart and soul, more than the simple meaning of the words. And the same too here with abstract calligraphy, and just like in song, when the notes go higher, there's a certain positive feeling, and when they drop down, there's this feeling of sadness, and so obviously the shape here, the direction that the words are going downwards, just as the glory of God just seems to have been going down and down. Where is the glory of God after something like the Holocaust? This work needs some explanation. It's called Ha'el, period. Ha'el. El is one of God's names. The photographs are taken from one of the death marches. The piece itself is a response to the claim that God didn't intervene, because God doesn't intervene in the free will of man, and it was the Nazis who killed, and not and God's not going to intervene with free will. But the thing with the death marches, I mean, they took place in horrible, horrible weather conditions, freezing weather, snow. The people who were starving and impoverished and certainly didn't have proper clothes for such conditions. Thousands I believe thousands have died in these death marches. And the weather is something that obviously has nothing to do with free will. It's something that we claim God has control over, the forces of nature. And so these deaths can't be, who's responsible for these deaths that were as a result of the weather? There's a midrash that when, I'm sorry, so there's part of the Jewish prayer has the words Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora, God who is great, mighty, awe-inspiring. That's part of the regular daily prayer service. And the midrash goes that when Jeremiah saw the destruction of the temple, he asked, he couldn't say he couldn't fully praise God. He said, how could he say the words awe-inspiring? Where is your awe-inspiration when the temple is being destroyed? And he couldn't use these words. He had to omit the word awe-inspiring. And when Daniel saw the exile, people being expelled and led, he said, where is God's might? And he couldn't use this word. He omitted this word in his praise of God. And what I'm saying in this piece is that after the Shoah, one cannot use any words of praise. Seems to be so out of place and so crude. And so the piece is called Ha'el, period. God, period. No words of praise can be added. That's how I felt. This piece is called, is named Miriam Rachel, which is the name of my father's, the older of the two younger daughters. And again, I'm repeating phrases that I used before, Aye Makom Kavodo and Ayeka, Echa Ayeka, superimposed over these photographs. These are the only photographs. We only have one family photograph of my father's family in Poland. And just to look at those eyes, the innocent eyes, and to think what kind of human being, how can humans do this? Send girls like this to gas chambers. Over 1 million children perished in the Shoah. It's unfathomable. So this is in her memory. And then in the memory of my my father's youngest sister, Hinda. And again, I'm looking at this young girl, this innocent little girl, with a ball in her hand. I thought that she was sent to a gas chamber. So I took the phrase from Psalms, which normally reads "Chadumiyat," which is words of praise of God, or saying basically it's silent. To you, silence is your glory. In other words, God is so great that there are no words that can describe your glory. just silence. That's the ultimate praise. And I turned this around, turned the words around, and turned it into a question. Dumia lecha tehila, silence for you, that's your glory. Once I had the words Dumia lecha tehila, I decided to continue with that, and I just took a very, very large brush. This is a very large piece. Very large sumi brush, and just in angry, chaotic writing, I wrote Dumia lecha tehila in brush script. You can see some of the letters, Dalid, Vav, Mem, Taf, Lamed, Hey. Again, just a cry out, scream against the silence. Once I had that, I actually scanned in those words, those letters from the original piece, I put it on I suppose, a more interesting background. And I added texts to the piece. You can't really read the text, but in this image, but they're there in the white writing, small white writing that goes around the place. Here's black on a white background. The text is taken from Ezekiel, and those words that I chose are sort of a cry, scream against the supposed promise of God. I mean, it's an answer to this, the claim, or it's a question thrown back at the claim that somehow there was, the crazy claim that somehow there was collective punishments. But we have the quote from Ezekiel, which promises to the individual who is just, to the individual, that he will surely live. I mean, here's the entire quote. I'm not going to read the whole quote, but basically it says, if a man is just and does what is lawful and right, and he does all the things around, he has not robbed anybody, and he's given bread to the hungry, and he's clothed the naked, and he's fine in business and seeks justice between man and man, he's done everything that he's supposed to do, the promise, he shall surely live, saith the Lord God. And of course, it's hard to say that the promise was kept. And so that same text I wrote in other pieces. Here I just took a large calligraphy pen, Coit pen, and in writing over a black background, I repeated those last words, he shall surely live, Chayot tichien, Noam Hashem Elokim. And I added the text from Ezekiel, and I threw splattered red paint over the piece. This sort of gets lost in the image. You can't really feel the texture of the work in the, in this flat image. But anyway. And again, another version of writing those words, Chayot tichye and Noam Hashem, you shall surely live, which I mean, the piece on the left is the original piece. And I took the words, and then again, I splattered some red paint over it, and then I threw water on it, sort of, because the promise basically was erased. The promise didn't happen. And then, just out of curiosity, I scanned the piece into the computer, as I had a feeling that the negative might actually cause a stronger image. In the beginning, I thought so, but then I sort of gone back to the original, and I think that's maybe a bit stronger. And of course, here's the entire text from the entire chapter from Ezekiel. And yet another version where I cut out letters from the final verse, Chayot tichye Noam Hashem, you shall surely live, he shall surely live, and included the nikud, the vocalization marks. I had painted or I had written a abstract brush marks, chaotic brush marks for the background. I think I even scanned in some, I don't know if you could see it, some pictures from the photograph of my father's family. And, oops, sorry about that. Sorry. And written the whole text. This piece I don't feel really works. I mean, I just have a feeling it's a bit too aesthetic, and maybe the orange red is a bit too calming. And although I like the piece compositionally, I'm not sure it really reflects the anger and the feeling I was feeling regarding these texts. And the last piece, this piece actually is not part of the series. It's a piece I did many years before. It's called Hamishuga, the crazy person. And it's a short story by I think a superb authoress named Ida Fink, who wrote short stories about the Shoah, but they're written very, very subtly and delicately, and yet they were so powerful. And the story takes place in a psychiatrist's office. And the person is recalling a story, what happened to him during the Shoah. He describes himself as he's a hunchback. He's a wretched creature, a hunchback, ugly, and his job in the Shoah was to sweep the streets of the ghetto. And for some reason, he said he was blessed with 3 beautiful daughters. And one morning, early in the ghetto, he gets up in order to sweep the streets. And while he's sweeping, the Nazis came in, Germans came in, and to have an aktia, where they rounded up all the Jews in the ghetto, and they start marching them onto trucks, which everybody knows will eventually lead them to the death camps. And he's sweeping the store, and he sees the Germans come in, and he hides behind this tree, and with his completely broken broom. I'm not much of a drawing artist, so this is my rendition of him hiding behind this tree with his lousy brush. And all of a sudden he sees his 3 daughters being led out by the Germans onto the trucks. And he doesn't know what to do. He's in a dilemma. He's in hiding, and he feels this. What he has to do is run over to his daughters and hug them all and be with them. And he's in hiding. And all of a sudden, his youngest daughter notices him in hiding. And she cries out to him, Abba, Abba, boilenu, Daddy, Daddy, come to us. And he doesn't know what to do. Should he run? I mean, if he runs and hugs his daughter, it's immediate death for him. He's quite aware of that. And yet, how could he watch his daughters being led to their death? And after the daughter calls out to him, the oldest daughter hears that she calls out to him. And she looks, and she also sees her father in hiding, and she immediately understands the situation, and she hushes up her daughter. I'm sorry, she hushes up her sister, her younger sister. And he, in the dilemma, doesn't do anything, and he watches them being led onto the trucks. And he did nothing. And now he's recounting this. He's gone crazy. I mean, he's gone completely crazy after this. And when when I read this story, it's a very short story. This is the entire story in these 3 little paragraphs. And when I first read this story, I mean, it was so powerful to me. My daughters were at this age that he's describing his daughters, and I'm trying to imagine this insane, surrealistic, but true situation that happened, and I'm trying to place myself, in that situation, and feel what it would be like to be in that dilemma. And I started to go crazy just thinking about this, and to think about how many situations They were like this in the Holocaust, and it was just a very powerful piece and a very powerful story and experience for me. And this is the piece that I did, and this is basically my my entire presentation. So thank you for being with me. I wish I could end with some words of comfort on this Yom HaShoah, this Holocaust Memorial Day. Some comforting thoughts that maybe we've learned something from this entire experience. But I'd love to say never again, but I'm not sure I could say that, the way the world is going. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me.